All right, welcome back to Espionage. This is a U.S. history class, not a spy class. So, we're going to be talking about espionage. Because remember, after World War II ended, we ended it very spectacularly with those 2 nukes in Japan. And like we've mentioned in class before, part of the reason for that was to end the war. Part of the reason to that was to send a message to the Soviet Union and any other country on Earth that we have nukes and you do not. And we figured that would be a limited time kind of thing. We figured it would take the USSR 10, 15, 20 years to build their own nukes, once they knew it was possible, but trying to actually make it work. They got them a lot faster than that. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But in the 1950s, Americans were very scared of nuclear war, and they were very scared of communism. To help our school children be less afraid of communism, the U.S. Congress officially added the words "under God" to the Pledge of Allegiance, because the USSR, Communist Russia, was officially an atheist government. They had no religion in the country, and technically most religion was kind of considered illegal, although some of the stuff that was like Eastern Orthodox was kind of still considered cultural. It was a whole thing. Take some courses on Russian history. They will not be boring. It's a lot, but it won't be boring. So that was 1954. So before 1954, it was "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." No "under God" right there at the end, right? So it goes straight from, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So if you've ever been saying the pledge and you notice there's that weird pause with "under God," it's because it wasn't originally there. It wasn't part of the cadence. It wasn't part of the sort of rhythm of the piece. So now it's "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." See how it kind of breaks up the flow there? Anyway, that's what it is. The original pledge did not have "under God" in it. So if you're looking at like old video or old text and you see the pledge without "under God" in it, that's because it wasn't until 1954. And now it's in there. And if your school children were afraid of nuclear bombs, well, they had these lovely PSAs, these lovely little animated PSAs where this turtle would demonstrate how to duck and cover. Now it was cute little firecrackers in that case, and you would retreat into a shell and you duck and cover. So duck and cover drills are not one of the ones that we do currently at public schools in Texas. We do fire drills, we do tornado drills, we do a bunch of them, active shooter drills. We don't do duck and cover drills anymore. So if your parents are about my age, you might need to ask your grandparents, but if your parents are a little older than me, you might check with them and see if they still had to do duck and cover drills in class. And they'll be able to tell you what it was, how it went, what it was like. Now this video is probably, Bert the Turtle. Bert's his name. Okay, sorry, I forgot his name. So Bert the Turtle is the official duck and cover mascot for the U.S. government. And this video is like 10 or 11 minutes long, so we're not going to watch the whole thing in class. We'll watch a little bit of it in class, though. So remember I said the Soviets got the nuclear bomb like way faster than we thought they were going to? Now, this isn't only the fault of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, but it was partly the fault of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. They were not the only spies that stole nuclear secrets and got them to Russia, but they did sell a lot of nuclear secrets to Russia. So they were both arrested, tried, and executed for treason against the U.S. in 1951. We do know Julius sold classified information about nuclear bombs to the Soviet Union, and originally people thought maybe his wife Ethel was an innocent bystander in it. No. We did find the evidence that she was actively involved in this. She was charged as an accomplice, and she was also executed. So, Project Venona, remember these projects we have, this is a project, Operation Paperclip, Project Venona. So, a lot of people, when they saw the Rosenberg trial, they were like, well, a lot of that evidence was circumstantial. Maybe Julius did it, but probably not Ethel. We'll see. So the U.S. government basically starts going back to Russian transmissions that they had intercepted from 1943 up until like 1950. And they start decoding them. Because they have a bunch of these messages and they know how to decode the message. It just takes time. And when you're fighting a war and Russia's on your side, you're a little more worried about decoding the German and Japanese messages than the Russian messages. But the Venona project is going back to all of those old ones, decoding them and trying to figure out, what they were saying, what information we can get from them. And in these documents, not from 1943, but a little bit later on, in these documents we get proof that both of the Rosenbergs were spies for the USSR. They definitely were. We have the proof now. So with that proof in hand, Americans were like, oh, okay, well then they definitely both did it. So we also found out a lot of other information about a lot of other spies. So like, the Red Scare that we talked about the other day with, Senator McCarthy and the House Un-American Activities Committee, there were communist spies, not as many as they thought there were, but there were definitely communist spies around. So let's stop talking about that bummer of a topic and let's talk about rock and roll music, because here it comes. Now, obviously, I can't just play these on YouTube, but you can go back and watch these yourself. I'll play them, at least a little bit of them in class, the legally allowed amount in class. But you can watch your own. You can watch these on your own. This one is Chuck Berry, the father of rock and roll. His first big hit was Johnny Be Good. If you've watched, if you've got parents into older music, you already know this song. Or if you've watched Back to the Future, that's the song that he plays, and he's like, "Oh, you didn't really like it? Well, don't worry, your kids are gonna love it." Anyway, Chuck Berry. Born October the 18th, 1926, and he died March 18th, 2017. He only died a few years ago. I actually remember when that happened. So, remember when I said, we're in history, right? Like, the time period we're studying history right now is the modern age. This dude died in 2017. There are people from this time period that are still around. Just not Chuck Berry. So, fantastic guitar player. Great singer, definitely had the dance moves to pull it off too. Very, very good at what he did. Aretha Franklin, the queen of rock and roll. Now she's a bit more famous for some of her gospel and soul type music, but her sort of combination of rock music with gospel and soul music is I don't know, it's a huge part of rock music to this day. And she is just a fantastic singer and artist. Unfortunately, like a lot of these people we're talking about, she's not alive anymore, but she only died a couple years ago. August 16th, 2018. So not even 3 years ago yet. So all of you were around on this planet at the same time as Aretha Franklin. Unless someone's watching this YouTube video 30 years from now, in which case, why? And how's things going 30 years from now? Leave a comment. Sorry. So anyway, again, we'll listen to a bit of this. Respect, R-E-S-P-E-C-T. She didn't write it. That's a cover song she did, but it's her song now. And of course, we can't talk about rock and roll in the 1950s without talking about Chuck Berry, without talking about Aretha Franklin, and without talking about Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley was born in 1935, so he was born around the same time as those other two, and he died in 1977. He died pretty young. What was that, 32? Jeez. Okay, so I'm older than Elvis Presley ever was. Good to know. Good to know. That's a weird thing to find out today. Anyway, I'll deal with my own existential crises later. I'm on your time right now. It's valuable. So Elvis Presley, king of rock and roll. Chuck Berry, father of rock and roll. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. Television stations would only film him from the waist up because of his very provocative dancing style, which he got from a lot of sources, but he definitely borrowed a lot of his musical stylings, a lot of his singing styles, a lot of the songs he did, and a lot of the dance moves from, black musicians like Chuck Berry and some other ones. And there have definitely been accusations over the years that, he stole it from these black artists. And that's certainly a conversation to have, but, if you go back and read what Chuck Berry had to say back then when people were asking him about it back then, and the rest of his life, he basically said, no, man, we were all musicians, we were all artists, we were all taking from each other, and, he saw Elvis as sort of helping sort of spread that kind of music, making it accessible to everybody in the country, so then people would kind of go in and find, black artists that played similar stuff, so it's complicated. I mean, obviously, the history of race in America is complicated, but it doesn't seem like Elvis was just, stealing stuff from black people and making money off of it. It seems that he went in with different intentions and different results, and certainly was happy to play with black musicians, and a lot of traditional white musicians were not willing to do that. Now, jazz musicians, they had been playing together a while. Rock musicians, for the most part, from the beginning, there wasn't as much of a racial divide, at least among the artists. Another thing that Elvis Presley did to connect it back to yesterday's vaccination thing is he actually got the new polio vaccine live on television in 1956. So 1955, the vaccine is introduced. Some people are taking it, but not enough. Elvis, they convince Elvis, hey, get this polio vaccine. So he goes on national television. Nurse, rolls up the sleeve. He gets the shot, puts the little Band-Aid on, and he's like... And then people went out and got the polio vaccine. And now we basically don't have polio in this country anymore. So Jonas Salk, big ups to you for helping cure polio, or not cure it, not like a cure for it, but to help prevent polio and get rid of it. Big ups to Elvis Presley for going on TV, getting the shot, doing what he had to do. So way to go, Elvis. Now there's a bit of a generational gap here. So the kids love it. The kids are a big fan of rock music. And when we listen to it in class, so here, rock music was seen as loud, obnoxious, and even satanic by the older generations. When we go back and listen to some of the stuff in class, it is going to be some of the most inoffensive. It's going to be good music. It was very creative. It was very new at the time. These days it sounds a little old-fashioned, because it's from a long time ago. And it's going to sound kind of quaint, they're singing about wanting to go kiss some girls and stuff, not anything turn on the radio these days and they are a bit more explicit than that, a bit more, what's the phrase, explicit lyrics than that. But to the baby boomers, this was awesome. To their parents and their grandparents, this was the devil. This was wrong. This was loud and obnoxious. It wasn't even music. And if that sounds familiar, it's because your parents and grandparents probably said that about the music you like. Maybe not. Maybe they've got good music tastes. I sure don't, but maybe they do. So part of the reason these baby boomers loved this music so much is it did bother their parents a lot. And this forms this sort of generational gap. I mean, there's always a bit of a gap between, parents and their kids, but this sort of really sort of almost a versus each other kind of a thing. And a big part of why a lot of the older generation did not like it is that a lot of rock music, basically all rock music, came from, African American musical styles. gospel, the blues, old spirituals. And that's where, sort of the forms and the rhythms and the melodies and the lyrics and the style of rock and roll came from. And so, the older generation that doesn't approve of all that sort of a thing, they don't like it. So that's going to be it for Chapter 8. Test on Thursday. Well, sorry, if you're listening to this in January of 2021, the test is on Thursday, February the 4th. If you're listening to this, 30 years from now, I don't know, maybe there's no tests anymore. Let me know in the comments what education is like. So next time on U.S. history, John F. Kennedy gets assassinated, Martin Luther King Jr. gets assassinated, Robert F. Kennedy gets assassinated, and Malcolm X gets assassinated. And that's only a few of them. So let's get started on the 1960s and the Civil Rights era. We'll see you then.